Today on The State of Us, Trump, DeSantis, and Pence. Who will lead the Republicans? Welcome to The State of Us. I'm your host, Justin T. Weller, joined, of course, today by the one and only, our friendly redneck liberal and the senior resident historian here at True Chat, Mr. Lance L. Jackson. Today, we're taking a look at how Pence calls the January 6th a tragic day, while Trump claims he's been persecuted over the riot, and how Trump and Ron DeSantis are jockeying for position ahead of the potential 2024 showdown. So who will lead the Republican Party into the next election and beyond? Well, that's part of what we're going to be talking about today, but we couldn't possibly begin that conversation, Lance, unless we have a word of the day.
We're going to go with one that I think many of the audience maybe have heard before. 3 syllables. It's a noun. Kingmaker. K-I-N-G-M-A-K-E-R. And it means a politically powerful person who is instrumental in getting candidates into office. So while we're going to be talking about 3 possible Republican nominees, keep in mind who or what is going to be the determining factor for who decides to make a run in the Republican Party and who's going to be the kingmaker, who's going to be the one that makes the difference for one of these candidates or one who has not been named yet, who comes out of the woods or out of the woodwork.
So we're going to talk about Pence first, then DeSantis, and then Trump, and then sort of discuss who seems the most likely out of this group, or is there anybody else who is likely to be able to challenge one of these individuals? So Pence and Trump were both giving a speech recently in the Capitol in Washington, and it was just hours apart. So they were there on the same day, different venues, different crowds, and both given a speech. And they both had things to say about the other one. Pence specifically, and I think there's a lot that's telling in these remarks. He says, quote, "I don't know that the president and I differ on issues, but we may differ on focus. I truly do believe that elections are about the future." He also said Americans have been through a lot in recent years, including a, quote, "divisive election and a tragic day in our nation's capital." So part of what I think's curious here, Lance, is, he sort of acknowledges up front that I'm not sure that the issues, in terms of how we view what needs to get done or what we want to get done, I'm not sure that I'm different than the president in those regards, but I am going to be different in my approach.
He wants to bring in the Republicans and the supporters of former President Trump. He wants to bring them into his fold. And so he's going to say, well, I'm going to do the same things, but my style is different. I'm not going to be as confrontational and loud and I'm going to support democracy. Right, in so many words. And I don't know how you can not be that way if you are Mike Pence, because President Trump was able to, rally a group of people into the Republican Party that didn't seem like had been there back with George Bush. He brought in more Hispanic voters. He brought in more African-American voters than previous Republican presidents had. So obviously Pence wants to play on that, but he also wants to point out, say, hey, I'm the one that supported democracy here, that I did my job, and not to jump ahead because President Trump has been quick to say that, and is still saying, hard to believe, right, that I won the election and Mike Pence let us all down, So if you're Pence, and I think it's very interesting, I don't know, I guess I never really saw Mike Pence as presidential, but I've got some friends in Indiana which is where Mike Pence comes from and was governor, they said, oh yeah, this has been coming for 20, 30 years. This is what Mike Pence has been aiming for. But I've never really seen Mike Pence as a presidential candidate. But he's got that to hang his hat on, right? That I'm a morally conservative. I mean, yeah, he is conservative. Morally conservative Republican, but I also stood up for the Constitution. I did what was right for my country, and I faced a hard decision, and I did what was best for the country, even though the president was mad at me and people were coming after me. And to the belief, whether it was going to be or not, you know, the January 6th commission has brought out that many of Pence's aides were sending messages to their family members saying, I may never see you again. I love you. Take care of the children, take care of, you know, our parents, blah, blah, blah. They were sending, you know, last messages to their families because they thought they were in danger. Whether they really were or not, the belief was they were, and it was because their boss, Mike Pence, had stood up for the Constitution. So, yeah, I mean, what else do you say if you're Mike Pence, if you want to be president? Because you have a popular, with the people that supported President Trump, those ideas are still popular.
I think it's a very difficult place for him to be in, though, because he is trying to walk a very fine line of, in some ways, being critical of the president, but at the same time, you were also his vice president, you know, and you were part of the administration. So, you know, trying to make any substantive policy differentiations is tricky, even if Mike Pence has some stuff, because then it's like, well, wait a minute, you supported XYZ, you were his vice president. So how can you, you know, so I think there's some of that as well that's complicated in terms of what is Mike Pence's path, because to your point, I don't necessarily see him as somebody that's going to broaden, make a bigger tent, right? It's a question of, you may be able to, if you can squeeze enough support away from Trump, you know, you may be able to get the nomination and then hope that those people that you didn't get rally behind you because you're looked at as the lesser of, you know, two evils. You know, does Mike Pence stand a real chance of challenging Trump? I would be surprised.
Okay, but then the question becomes, is it going to be Trump?
Right.
Will Trump run? So, you know, is Pence just
and if
playing
it's not,
his cards out now and, you know, hey, I'm a non-charismatic Trump, right? I'm not going to ruffle feathers, but I'm going to do the same kind of things that they did. And, oh yeah, and remember, I'm the guy that saved the Constitution and saved the country.
Right.
To where, okay, you know, and how strong, I mean, we're not even going to go there today. This will be a show, you know, in the next couple of weeks. How strong's the Democratic field going to be, you know, after these midterms? And, you know, is it, you know, what kind of beating does the Democratic Party take, or miraculous win do they get in the midterms coming up here will determine who runs for them, you know? And then Trump is trying to be the kingmaker for all these congressional races, you know, in the midterms. And what will that do to Trump's chances to run for reelection, or his desire to run for reelection? You know, does he lead the wave of the Trumpist to take over both houses of Congress, or does it fall flat on the face and the Republicans are like, ooh, I don't know, maybe it's time for a change. He did some things that we wanted done, and, you know, okay, so we used him and now we're done with him. Trump's not used to that, you know? In Trump's life, he's always the center of attention. He's not used to being pushed to the wayside and doesn't like it when he is. So, you know, I just think Pence is a quieter version of Trump. And to your point, I'm not sure that'll sell.
Right. I think, well, because part of the, I think, allure of Trump was that, you know, again, whether or not you think it's a good thing, he's entertaining, you know. And Mike Pence, at least every time that I've ever watched the man, I've never felt like I would use the word entertaining to describe him.
Exact opposite. When he's probably the exact opposite of Trump.
Right. Well, which is part of why, I mean, when you're talking about a good selection for vice president, right? If you're just talking strategically for Trump, that's part of why Pence was a good selection, because, you know, he's from one of those sort of Midwestern states, and he's the calm, you know, sort of, some of the people that were hesitant were less hesitant once Mike Pence was on the ticket, because it's, well, he'll taper Trump.
And Pence also kept the moral majority, old school GOP in house for Trump. You know, this divorced man, wild ideas, who had, you know, donated money to Democrats in his lifetime and supported Hillary Clinton.
Right.
Oh boy, you want me to vote for him? Oh, well, we'll run Mike Pence, Mr. Moral Majority himself. Oh, okay. Then,
yeah,
you know, that religious right conservative group that's been around since the Reagan days said, okay, we can bite our
if he's
tongue.
on the ticket, then he's
Right.
a sufficient vouch for going this direction.
Right.
Because we feel like if Trump's not the guy to represent our religious interests, Mike Pence definitely is. And I think that is the part that makes the possibility of Pence competing against Trump interesting, because now you're giving that old religious right a real, they have to think some about this choice, right? Because before, where they were slower to embrace Trump directly, they come on board because you start to cater to them. Well, now they have an option that's not that, you know, where we can get all the policy without the moral corruptibility in their eyes. I'm not saying that Mike Pence
Right.
is in fact not morally corrupt, but to Lance's point, he's also seen as, you know, I believe the Constitution said I had to do XYZ, and that's what I did, you know, because that's the quote unquote, that's the right thing to do. And I very openly for many, many years have talked about my, you know, conservatism as a religious person, and that my conservatism is primarily informed from that outlook, where Trump has a lot. I think Trump's, you know, pitch to people is much more about how they've been wronged or how they've been cheated. And it has far less to do, I think, with viewing things through a religious lens. So let's talk about the other guy, Ron DeSantis, Florida governor. How does he factor into all this? To find out, keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back. Ron DeSantis. Who the heck is that? Well, that's what a lot of people were saying before President Donald Trump, right, stamps Ron DeSantis with his endorsement. And then all of a sudden, oh my gosh, Ron DeSantis, we all love this guy. When I say we all, I am not referring to myself, but sort of those inside the Republican Party who are looking at sort of this, you know, guy that was not leading, right? And then Trump sees him on Fox News a few times, gives him an endorsement, and now he's a popular figure in the Republican Party.
Young, photogenic, from Florida. You know, I mean, got a lot of check, right? Big state in the Electoral College. He's young. He's vibrant. He's energetic. You know, he really plays well in that market. And he's the governor of the state where former President Trump calls home, which makes it interesting as well.
Yes. So one thing here that I think is important to take into account is that he has not. So there's been a lot of Republicans, right, Lance, who have said, you know, we still love Trump. We support him if he's going to run. Like, that's good. He has not taken that step. At the same time, Trump has also not taken the step of openly saying this would be a bad choice for president, right? Ron DeSantis. So they're sort of in this limbo place of Ron DeSantis does owe something to Trump, right, for his current position. But at the same time, he's also made elusive statements to the effect similar to Mike Pence of, you know, it's time maybe for new blood. He's playing without directly saying the generation card, right? Trump's old. You know, he'll be even older by the time he gets elected. And I, still have many, many good years ahead. So I'm not saying I am running. I'm not saying I'm not running, but we're going to feel this out and see, because I still have years left. So it's okay either way. If now's the time, great. If it's not the time, that's okay too, because I have years.
Well, he also has to get reelected as governor of Florida before the election. So,
which is part of Trump's calculation of, do I box him out by getting into the race before he knows whether or not he's governor again?
And because, as the article points out, DeSantis is collecting quite a war chest. He is traveling, for the governor of Florida,
$129 million.
Yeah, he is gathering a big war chest, and he's traveling to New York and Utah and California and different places to meet with kingmakers within the Republican Party, and they're donating $5 million, $10 million at a time to the governor of Florida, right? And they don't even live in that state, and they run big companies, and one of those companies, and the name escapes me now, but is moving his headquarters from one state down to Miami, Florida, after making, I think it was a $10 million.
It's Citadel. The hedge fund firm Citadel is moving from Chicago to Miami, right, and gave $5 million
to DeSantis's reelection campaign for Florida. So, you talk about kingmakers, and it seems like DeSantis is putting a lot of those people, starting, those fringe people that we've never heard of, but he's putting them in his camp. And so he's loading up for a run, whether he does or not. And there is that question within his group of people and his group of advisors: do we run against Trump? And right now DeSantis isn't saying yes or no about that, but he's also not being coy about, I think I'd like to be president. When asked, he's like, well, if I can get reelected as the governor of Florida and the momentum continues, yes, I would entertain that idea to be president of the United States. So whereas Trump's not making a decision, DeSantis isn't backing away from those people who seem to want him to run. I just briefly mentioned at the beginning of the segment, Florida, right? The Electoral College, Florida is the key to whomever wants to become president. So you would think that their sitting governor, if DeSantis were to get reelected, would bring the state into the Republican fold. And there are those people out there that say, oh, well, Trump runs again. Would DeSantis take the vice presidency?
Well, we talked about fundraising, and I think that one thing to point out is, obviously, we said, you've got almost $129 million for governor. And that's in comparison, by the way, to Trump's $110 million at the beginning of the year. So while it's not like Trump's not sitting on any money, very interesting. I mean, just the money dynamic. But when we turn to other numbers, specifically polling, right? Quinnipiac poll in July found that 69% of Republicans wanted Mr. Trump to run again. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, so, almost 7 in 10 Republicans want Trump. I mean, then why are we even wasting time on Pence and DeSantis? Well, here's the key. That is down from 78% last October. And a recent New Hampshire survey showed that Mr. Trump and DeSantis were statistically tied in the state. So the story is not so much look at the huge support that DeSantis has garnered. It's look at the fact that just since last October, in the matter of just a few months, Trump has continued to lose support from Republicans. So while, yes, he still has a comfortable, majority of Republican support that would like him to run again, I also think that a decent pollster would probably say he was the president. He's a known figure. And while DeSantis is becoming more known, and some people know Mike Pence, they don't have nearly the profile, obviously, of Trump. So one of the things is that's part of why you're seeing, I think, DeSantis's all over the country, right, making all these appearances. It's like, well, you're running for governor. Why are you doing speaking events in all these different places? Well, because to Lance's point, he's open to and considering a presidential bid. And if you're going to do that, you need some polling to figure out if people might actually give you a shot. And if people don't really know who you are very well, other than that you're the governor of Florida, that's challenging. But again, I think part of the problem with DeSantis is going to be one of the strengths and weaknesses, right, is that he shares similar policy ideas to Trump. And what I mean by that is it's a strength in that, okay, again, you're offering an alternative to Trump. It's a weakness in two respects, I think. Number one is it's a weakness in that same issue with Mike Pence, right? Because that's kind of the card that Pence is playing too. So now are you going to split the people that would consider somebody other than Trump, thereby giving Trump the win because you've got two other people instead of just one other person that people could rally behind?
But even if you don't agree with all of what DeSantis has done or said in Florida, he does have the charisma that Mike Pence is lacking. So if you think, okay, we need a younger version of Donald Trump. So, okay, well, I like Pence's ideas, but he's so bland. I need somebody. Well, DeSantis is that younger, new Republican who has some of that same charisma that Donald Trump has, that seems to play better with people from the other party more than Trump's in-your-face style. So I think that bodes well for DeSantis if he decides to make a run, is that he can be the new face of the Republican Party, and he is charismatic and is photogenic and might play well with what's becoming known as Trump's base.
Well, in the Wall Street Journal article, which we're using sort of as the basis for some of what we're talking about, it's linked at thestateofus.org, it points out that Mr. DeSantis has also won bipartisan support for his environmental record, including money for conservation and Everglades restoration. He's raised teachers' pay and given bonuses to first responders. And he's frustrated Democrats by touting projects in the state that are ultimately funded by the Biden administration's COVID-19 aid and infrastructure bills, which he has openly criticized. So part of the dichotomy there is that while, yes, I think those of us that are paying closer attention to politics understand that he is a red-blooded conservative, he has also done some token things in the state of Florida that have demonstrated that there's things that he's open to that aren't necessarily strictly Republican, right? We've also talked about how the Republicans sort of, messaging on climate has started to shift some as well, away from just, flat out denial of it happening to, well, we should protect things like the Everglades, right? I love Florida. We love the Everglades. We got to take care of them, that kind of thing. And you're raising teachers' pay, right? Which is something that, generally speaking, that's going to win you some support. And you're giving bonuses to first responders, and you're improving infrastructure. And all of those things are generally seen, right, as just broadly likable things. I mean, people like those things. So he's more disciplined, I think, in some respect, too, in that he's careful about sticking to a particular message. But he also is openly will criticize Democrats, but then make use of good ideas or policies, which, again, call it whatever you want, that's going to help him win some support, because the people who really don't care who's getting the credit, they may not like everything DeSantis is doing, but they say, well, he did do a few of these things. Maybe this is somebody I could live with because, he likes these other things and I like some of those things. So I think there's definitely, I'm sure his strategists are telling him there may be an appeal to what you are offering. But then that still leaves the question of President Trump. What will he do? And how will that determine the path for Pence and or DeSantis? Find out. Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back. Appearing several hours before Mike Pence in Washington, D.C., Mr. Trump was in front of a group of his former administration officials. He portrayed himself as endlessly persecuted, bringing up the 2 impeachment proceedings he faced in office. He derided the January 6th committee as made up of, quote, political hacks and thugs. And he asked, where does it stop? Where does it end? Mr. Trump also repeated his false claim of winning the 2020 election. Quote, we may just have to do it again, he said to applause. We have to straighten out our country. His speech focused heavily on crime, and he called for more police on the streets and programs to gut gangs and rid streets of drugs, saying traffickers should revive the death penalty. He also called for new presidential powers to fire civil servants, part of his plan to fight what he calls the deep state of government. The biggest applause, however, came when he said that transgender women should be barred from competing in women's sports. He mimicked a biological man easily lifting weights, drawing laughter. Quote, it is so disrespectful to women, he said. To counter that, the Democratic National Committee had paid for a truck to roll by with a mobile billboard welcoming Mr. Trump's return that simply read, you lost.
Rightfully or wrongly so. The Democrats have continued to go after President Trump. But at the same point, when he talks about being persecuted, well, then shut up that you won. You know, I mean, you can't go around saying you won when you lost and then not expect somebody to come after you, because I'm sorry, folks, and, you know, send your cards and letters here to True Chat, but he lost, okay? And I don't care what conspiracy theory you want, what to believe in, or what rabbit hole you want to go down. President Trump lost the election, okay? And what kind of role he played, I have my opinion. You have yours in the January 6th fiasco. And that's fine. We can agree to disagree, or we can agree. I'm not sure, you know, what everybody thinks. But you can't keep saying you won and then throw your hands up and say, well, they won't leave me alone. Well, when you're perpetuating a lie, don't people have to call you out and say, they're still lying about this? I know it plays well with those hardcore supporters of Trump. Is that enough to win another election? Is America ready for that kind of showmanship again? Well, from President Trump? You know, I'm not. Whether you agree with...
Well, you weren't ready the first time round, though, either, in fairness.
I wasn't, you know, but I'm not, yeah. I'm not really happy with what President Biden has done either. You know, so, I mean, I'm looking for I'm willing, you know, I'm open-minded enough to look for someone who will push a calmer social agenda and get some things done to bring Americans back together again, so that we're not sitting in two camps. If you agree with me on that we need to find a way to come together, former President Trump is not the candidate. And I think, like I said, it's going to be key here to see how much of a kingmaker Trump is in the midterm elections. If the Trump-backed candidates fall flat on their face, it's going to be pretty hard for the former president to raise money to make a run. So to me, that's going to be the interesting thing. That's what I will be keeping tally on that Tuesday in November. How many of the Trump-appointed candidates win versus how many lose? Because I think that will have the biggest effect on what kind of attempt former President Trump can make for the 2024 election.
I think it also depends on some external factors, right, that are hard to compute when you're talking about just the Republican side of the ticket, is sort of what was alluded to, which is who's the Democratic candidate? I mean, I think that historically it's easy to assume that the sitting president is going to be the candidate. I don't think that's an easy assumption this time around. I think it's been fairly openly discussed before he even won the presidency that he may not realistically serve 2 terms, you know? And I think now, with some of what we're seeing, and there will be, you know, we're going to do an episode on this about more than whispers now, but grumbles about, you know, not really sure that Biden's the guy, you know. I think the hard thing is if Biden isn't, I don't know who is. And I guess what I mean by that is I would like there to be somebody else, right? It's like when I look at the people that are realistic, contenders for president right now in 2024, I'm not excited about any of these people. They just, either I wholly disagree with what they want to push, or I just don't think they're the right, to Lance's point, if we're looking for more unity and if we're looking for progress, I'm not sure that anybody's really preaching that. It's a lot of pushing of tired agendas on both sides that I think Americans are getting worn out by, but still speaks to a certain breed of each party that is interested in, the hardcore version of whatever they're trying to push. And so I guess from a Trump standpoint, that's the thing that you can't calculate easily. I agree, Lance, that it'll be interesting to see what happens with the midterms, because Trump may, as much as he might want to announce before, he may wait partly because he wants to see, did my endorsements matter as much as I thought they would? And if they do, that may be the thing that cements it and says I'm in the race. At the same time, it could also go the other way. If they do flop, as you contended, is possible, then it might be, well, I'm not sure, I'm not sure it's worth it. And maybe I like the idea of being part of the conversation and being kingmaker, but not actually being in the race.
And you're also losing the money race right now too, if you're Trump.
Right.
And that's got to be very frustrating for him to deal with his personality. Now, we politically can say, well, yeah, but DeSantis is actually running for something. So, and Trump, is not. So yeah, it makes sense that DeSantis would be winning the money battle. But I would think with the personality that was shown by the former president for the 4 years he was president, he would not be taking that well. So then the question that I have for you, Justin, here, I know you're not a betting person, but if I gave you $100, how would you divide it on who has the chance to win the Republican nomination in 2024 at this point?
If these three are running?
Well, these three, and then I'll let you take the field.
Oh, okay.
So where do you put your money? Do you split it evenly? Do you think that one of them is far and away the front runner, that's who you expect to be? Or do you take the field? I think at this point, I'm one of those, I'm going to take the field. I would probably put $50 on the field and then divide it up among the other three candidates in some form or fashion. I think there's a chance that there's so much that will still happen before we get to a nominee for the Republicans. So I would take, with my hard-earned money, I would take the field as the leader and not one of these three.
I think that if these three are for sure in it, then I'm probably putting the money on Trump, getting the nomination. Not because I think he'll command a majority, but because I think he will have enough core that the others will have too difficult a time distinguishing, and the people that are loyal to him will make up enough that he can eke out with the nomination, even though he may not be necessarily,
You doing your wishy-washy 40% on Trump,
popular.
or are you going to go with how much money you're putting on Trump out of that 100?
If Trump's in it, I mean, again, if Trump's not in it, I'm not putting any money on Trump.
No, but you have to make that bet now.
Yeah.
The odds in Vegas as of today.
Yeah.
Where are you putting the $100? How are you spreading it out?
Yeah. Probably putting like 60 on Trump and maybe 30 on DeSantis and 10 on the rest of the field.
Oh, okay.
So
you think it'll be one of those two as of today? You feel like it's one of those two.
I just don't. There's no one else that comes to mind that would stand. There's other, just in fairness to everybody, there are other Republicans who I would be all for, not all for, but I mean, who I would be excited about and like, absolutely, this person should run. But none of those people, I don't think, stand a realistic chance because I just don't think the Republican Party is ready to cut clean from Trump. You know what I mean? It may not be Trump, but I think they still want the policy of Trump. They're not ready to shift away from the populist agenda yet. And so it has to be a candidate that embodies at least a hefty portion of what Trump stood for if they're to stand a chance of wrangling it away from Trump, you know. But at the same time, I don't think there's good odds of doing that because, you know, we all, and when I say we all, I'm counting myself in that, we all doubted the possibility that Trump would ever get the first nomination the time around, and he put pretty much everybody that said that to shame, you know. So
Trump gets the nomination. Does he win? 2 years.
That I have no idea.
2 years out. Okay. All right. So we're not betting on another Grover Cleveland. The only American president to ever serve 2 non-consecutive terms as president,
to attempt the split. Okay. I think that heavily depends on if the Democrats get their act together or not. And I don't put high hopes on that, just for what it's worth. I would feel very
Sounds
uneasy
to me like you're
right
hedging
now
that we're going to
betting.
have 4 more years of Trump.
I sure hope not.
Oh, okay.
I hope not. But I'm not, I put it this way, I am not yet ready to say I am optimistic that won't happen. So.
Okay. You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah. There's I'd say there's a 40% chance that we're going to have 4 more years of Trump. How's that?
No, I know. I don't want to hear 40% chance. Because, you know, you insiders, you longtime listeners know that we hate the 40% number. That means absolutely nothing.
I think there's a 40% chance that it's going to be a coin flip between
So Justin is telling
whoever the Republican nominee is and whoever the Democratic nominee is.
Well, you know, Justin.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea why we had this show today?
Well, we're not kingmakers, so it can't be for that reason.
Nope, but it's because we have a mission here at True Chat.
Okay.
And that mission is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And we've had that today. And like us or not, if you listen to us, we appreciate it. And if you want to voice your opinion and join the show, email us at podcast@thestateofus.org. We'd love to hear from you. And like I said, I don't care whether you like us or you don't like what we're saying. We love the fact that you're listening. We'd love to hear from you. And tell your family and friends that when you're talking to them about what you heard on this show, that they too can listen and they can find us as a podcast on Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, and everywhere podcasts are found.
The State of Us is available Tuesdays and Thursdays, first thing in the morning, released as a podcast. Those same episodes can be heard on the weekends on AM and FM radio stations across the United States. Who has the victory today, Lance?
I think I won today. What do you think, Justin?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
I thought you made a little comeback there in the top of the 9th, but I had built up a big enough lead. My relief pitcher was able to hang on.
Couldn't allow a shutout. That'd be no good. No good, no good. For the State of Us, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to producer Bradley Butch. Thank you all, our audience, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.